Hello and welcome to Scandinavia House Online and today's talk with the director and star of The Good Traitor, a new film inspired by the story of Henrik Kauffmann. I'm Ed Gallagher, President of the American Scandinavian Foundation and Scandinavia House, and I'll be speaking with director Christina Rosendahl and actor Ulrich Thomsen, who portrays Ambassador Kauffmann. One of Denmark's most celebrated directors, Christina Rosendahl, made her breakthrough with the music documentary Stargazer in 2002. This was followed by the dramatic feature, Triple Dare. Her third feature, The Idealist, a political thriller about the 1968 nuclear crisis in Thule, was internationally acclaimed and released in 2015. Her documentary, Violently in Love, came out 2 years later, and it dealt with domestic violence, creating a great deal of interest in Denmark. Now, The Good Traitor, currently being previewed at Scandinavia House Online, opens nationally on March 26th. Ulrich Thomsen has had a distinguished career acting on stage, screen, and television. He made his film debut in 1994 in Nightmare and went on to achieve international praise in Thomas Vinterberg's The Celebration. Since then, he has been seen in a wide variety of roles in Denmark and internationally, including the film Oven, for which he was awarded a Bodil, Denmark's top acting award. More recently, he starred in Vinterberg's The Commune, and he had his first directorial assignment with In Embryo in 2016. Welcome, Christina and Ulrich, and many thanks to Samuel Goldwyn Pictures for allowing us to have this talk and show this film. To begin with, I want to say how much I enjoyed The Good Traitor and was especially fascinated by the portrayal and the story of Henrik Kauffmann, who had a long association with the American Scandinavian Foundation during his 20 years as ambassador in Washington. He wrote for our Scandinavian Review, attended many events, and was a great friend of many of our trustees. He also had an important role to play in World War II and in Danish-American relations. And for that reason, I'm delighted this film has been made and more people will hear his story. Would you like to tell me how it came about?
Christina, yes, actually, during the work with my previous feature film, The Idealist, which takes place in Greenland, and it's about a big, famous plane crash, nuclear plane crash in 1968, and a case sort of following that big accident. And during the research of that film, I was interested in how come that there is an American Air Force base in Thule in the northern Greenland, and I found out that the base up there was a result of a big agreement that Henrik Kauffmann would sign with the Americans during World War II. And so I dug into that story about that relationship. Why did he give the Americans the authority to build an Air Force base in northern Greenland? And suddenly, I mean, this crazy story that I didn't know just, surfaced, and I was just totally fascinated and started researching his life. And I think that one of the big reasons that I got fascinated with him is that actually two things. First of all, that he single-handedly changed the course of history. I mean, he took his history into his own hands during the Second World War, and sort of created change that that is still happening today. And then also there's a personal story to him that I found really, really fascinating, and him also ending up being killed by his wife in 1963. So I think those are the two main sort of keyholes for me into the story.
I can see, yeah. Ulrich, you give a powerful performance of a complex individual, Kauffmann. Were you familiar with him before you took on the role? And did you?
I was familiar with the name, and I was familiar with the base in Greenland, but I wasn't familiar with the depth of that whole endeavor back in the Second World War. So yes and no, very, very superficially, as any actors, superficial. But no, so but no, I mean the quick answer is not really, but yes, I was familiar with him.
Did you do a special research on him, or did you just sort of go with the flow?
I didn't have too much time. I was relying on Christina's work with him. I was actually came from another film, as I recall. Like it was sort of almost rolled over. So, but we had some good talks, and I of course, and I was. I mean, of course, I read the script and I got a little into it, but I was fascinated by the complexity of the character. But no, I didn't. I mean, no. There again, no, I didn't have time to do too much of. I would have loved to do more now that we had access to Bo as well and his books and everything and all the work that you did together. Would that have changed the performance? I don't know. It's hard to say, of course, but looking back at it, I would have loved to just dig into him a little more, just his background. This is always good, Information is good in general.
You mentioned Bo Lidegård, and I think he's written a very good book about Kauffmann, and I gather you both read that book, and it had some influence on the film.
I read it after.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, no, because I was working on a film, so I did not have any time really to. Because it's a substantial book, and I just couldn't confuse the two things.
It's an 800-page book, so I read it during the research of the film. It's like a mother this thick. I read it a couple of times.
Very thorough, yes.
Yeah, it's. I think I when I started out researching, I called up Bo Lidegård and asked him if he would be a historical consultant on the film, and so he has been following me close. And I think that relationship with him taking place sort of in the shadow of the script writing process has been profoundly inspiring and also necessary for the film. But I also think that we have had a lot of arguments along the way. I mean, fights almost. Sometimes I even thought this is like a bad marriage going wrong because we're fighting all the time. But I think that the fights were good because it made me clear on the choices I had to make as a filmmaker. And it made me clear on where am I not a historian and in what way do I have to analyze and interpret the material. And I think that just discussing a little bit about the difference between creating art, making films, and being a historian, I think that it's very, very necessary when you tell a story that it comes from a personal viewpoint, right? So it has to be my story. I have to take responsibility for the story. And of course, a lot of factual stuff I could just sort of install in the process. But also, I mean, nobody knew what a historical person would think in a certain moment. I have to make that up, what made him do the choices he did, what people were he attracted to, what did he think was fun, what kind of food did he like, what kind of clothes did he wear. I can see some of it on pictures, but of course in the pictures there are no sights of him in a pajamas or being naked. So we have to rely on my knowledge of psychology, a lot of discussions with Ulrich,
my nudity.
Yeah, and your nudity, and have a discussion about that. And yeah, so I don't believe in objectivity. I believe in subjectivity, and we had a lot of fights with that, Bo and I.
Well,
there's of course a lot of very interesting features with personality features with Henrik Kauffmann. And when you look at it, there are so many things that you wanted to add in there. For instance, you just mentioned this pajamas, that he showed up in the pajamas at some point because he forgot his tuxedo. But then there were so many things. That was my biggest regret. Not a regret, but it was necessary as well, just to take away. I wouldn't call it fluff, but these interesting character bits. But it would have been in a way for the story of that particular time. It would only just add unnecessary noise, So, but of course, as an actor, he's like, oh, he's doing this, he's doing that. We should pop that in there, It makes him a broader. But as I was going through it, I thought, no, we need to just have him be. The character that you immediately recognize, and then from that point on, just tell the story basically. and that was sort of because he was such an charismatic character. When you could do a miniserie about his whole life, because everything he did was worth storytelling. But that was sort of my biggest but it was but I guess it was necessary, right, Christina, to keep it a little more, we call it stylized.
Well, also you were dealing with a very specific period in time too. I think.
Exactly, and that's what I mean.
Later in his life, he became more of an eccentric and more of a character. The movie meshes the very historical with a very personal story, and I think that's very interesting. And the historical seems to stick pretty close to all the facts. The personal is conjecture, or how did you come up with the idea of bringing together the two women? And I should say this is the wife and the sister of the wife who interact with Mr. Kauffmann.
So Kauffmann and his wife Charlotte, they die in a very spectacular way in 1963. So he's very sick at this moment, and Charlotte is taking care of him at the hospital, and so she cuts his throat with a knife and commits suicide by sticking a knife into her stomach, which is extremely painful. And so I guess I just researched that as any other kind of like effect. And I would look at the Danish National Archive. They have a big box full of investigation papers, interviews that the police would do when they found them in 1963, newspaper articles. I would talk to forensic doctors and people from the police, and I would talk to one of the iconic murder investigators that we have in Denmark about what this death, or this double death, what does it tell us about these people and about how they live their life. So I don't agree that the death and the whole personal story is something that is more kind of wiki, I made it up. I think it has been researched. I've been talking to some relatives, grandchildren of Kauffmann's. I have watched family footage like Super 8 films and still photography, and I have had all this material, and I think that this is this idea that she kills him in the end is my interpretation of that is that it is both an act of mercy for him because he's in a bad shape, and they're sort of used to being part of a high society life and being very fit. Also, he would be very he would go hiking mountains and stuff and being very athletic, Henrik Kauffmann. But I also think that the way that she killed him and herself was so aggressive that there needs to be another explanation than mercy. And so we have tried to sort of balance these two, and also shoot the scene in a way that the audience can have this discussion with themselves, because nobody knows. I mean, nobody really knows except for these two people, and they're not here to tell us, right?
Right.
And the movie starts with the killing, so we're not spoiling anything. So.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, it seemed to me a rather brave choice to begin with that, because you immediately grab the audience. Maybe some are just sort of taken away from it. I don't know. Did you always intend to begin with the killing?
We tried different. Yes, it was written like that, but in the editing, we tried to take the killing. Now it's kind of a framework of the film. It's the beginning and the end. But we also tried putting the whole thing in the beginning and the whole thing in the end, and we tested it a lot. And I think that I always were very much in love with opening the film with something that completely, almost iconic, violent, right? Because I think it gives the audience something to look for in the political story. And that was one of the big wishes, to sort of mirror the political and the personal in this story. And you're sort of forced to that as an audience when you get thrown this scene in your face from the first minute.
Very true, very true. And I found also the way you use music and the sound throughout the film quite interesting. You have overlays of bombs and bombing going on, juxtaposed against shooting a swimming pool in Charleston, South Carolina. It's interesting how you're bringing the war into the picture, even though it's bucolic America, as well as the music.
I think when you start out to do a Second World War film, I mean, there's like a million of those, right? So we were looking for new ways of telling the same old story, and also I'm not very interested in war itself, but we needed the war to feel really horrifying because that's the atmosphere of the situation, right? So I would discuss early on in the script, even before the script was written, with my sound designer, how can we tell the story of the war going on like thousands of miles away from Washington, where the film takes place, and give the audience a much more kind of emotional experience of the war through the sound. And so we did a lot of sound design before we shot the film, and that has been integrated into the soundtrack. And I think it works really well also because it's the sound of World War II. People know a lot of how that sounded. We know that from archive material, but so we have tried to combine it in new ways and give the audience a totally new experience of the war.
I think it's very effective. I also noted that the film seemed to be shot mostly in Hungary. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
That's money. That's because it's part of the financing. Yeah. So this, I mean, it's a kind of a low budget film, even though it doesn't look like that. But we shot it there for financial reason, but also because they have locations that were much more decadent and full of marble and gold and upper class richness. We had to have this luxury feeling. So and they have a lot of that in Hungary. It was beautiful to shoot down there, and great experience with the crew.
And there's an interesting connection between one of the main characters, Paul Bang Jensen, and Hungary. He is a hero in Hungary. Did that figure at all into your relations with the Hungarians?
They know about Paul Bang Jensen. He would save a lot of refugees coming from Hungary in 1956 when the Soviets invaded Hungary, and so he's a national hero down there. So, and he's Ulrich's sidekick in the story. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And were there particular challenges trying to create a feeling of Washington, D.C. and America in Hungary? Most of your actors were presumably Hungarian, huh? Most of the extras.
Yeah, the extras were, but I think we did. I mean, the production design department did a lot of, intense research and
very convincing.
Yeah, and also I think that using music and sound also creates that atmosphere because it sort of hits you on a more emotional level than like looking at stuff. So we try to work with sound a lot like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And was it difficult to find an actor who resembled Franklin D. Roosevelt and could be convincing in that role?
I was not so connected with having to find an actor who looked like FDR, but more kind of having the same kind of soul or personality in a way. So I think we could have looked for many months if we were to try to find someone who would look like him. So I decided that early on. Also to give Ulrich in his portrayal of Henrik Kauffmann, we worked a little bit with costumes and stuff from the original character, but I also want Ulrich to sort of take him and make him his own.
Roosevelt?
No, Kauffmann.
Yeah.
Ulrich, have you played many historical characters?
I have not actually. I think this is I played a soccer coach from '92. It's a bit historical these days. This one, and I don't know. I think this is the only two.
Because that is a particular challenge too. I think if someone has actually existed and you have to recreate someone. It
is. There isn't a whole lot of footage with. Henrik Kauffmann. We found there's some old clips. There's some sound bites from the speeches he did on radio, and there's a live clip from the Greenland Isn't that the Greenland?
Yeah.
Signed the Greenland Treaty. So and that was interesting. Of course, I mean, the images say a lot as well. You know, the hairstyle and sort of the well-dressed man he was. But interesting was, of course, that to hear him speak, because he's you know, he's German way back, so he had a mixture of, his English was a mixture of Danish, but also has some American as well, or more British. It was more British back in the day. The American back then was a little more, I wouldn't call it sophisticated, but a little more, you know, British. And but then he had some Danish words, but also some German words. He would say people instead of people.
Really? Interesting.
He's not Danish. That's German. So and he spoke a very, very old-fashioned Danish. You know, very, very old-fashioned. And today you just can't do it without sounding like you're making fun of something. So it was nice to hear, but we tried to make it, of course, relatable for the you know, the audience today. But we also wanted to bring it back in time a little bit, you know, so he has a more accurate, more sort of a little old-fashioned. So it, you know, it doesn't sound completely contemporary, you know. But
Right.
and I think that it found a good balance. The British, I can't really tell how that's. I guess no one can, because it was such a mix of both Danish and German, you know. But I'm happy with the language, how it turned out, you know. Also the Danish part of it. It gives a little, you know, makes it a little heightened, a little, you know, articulate and eloquent.
Good. Good.
But yeah, but it language is tough. It takes a long time to really finesse. But I guess we had to do it. I thought it was a good choice to not just be, you know, sound like somebody from.
What has the Danish response been to the film? Has it been well received? Has it made a difference in the perception of Kauffmann?
It was really well received, yeah. Like,
very well, yeah, no, very well received. I was surprised how little people know about. You knew about Kauffmann. And this is just I happened to stumble upon the Prime Minister. I might be wrong, so maybe it's a bad story. We were in television. She was doing her thing, and I was doing, and she's married to a photographer that I know. And so she said, I was here to talk about Kauffmann, who still is rummaging about in the political atmosphere, you know, at the parliament. And I think there was a look in her eyes that said that she didn't know who he was. That was just me. Maybe it was me interpreting, but it was that look of like, who the hell is that guy? What are you talking about? I might be wrong, and forgive me, if I took some liberties here. But people, that was a big part of the reception. People were really entertained and knew information, and didn't know that Denmark was so involved in, and this guy in particular was so involved in world history. So
I think we consider ourselves, we have this saying in Denmark that we are the Americans' best friends. This is, I mean,
yes,
I grew up with that notion, right? That we're the best friends with the Americans, and I think that friendship that comes from Henrik Kauffmann. And I think that was a big surprise to the audience, that's why it is. And the Americans are not interested in us because we're a little idyllic country far away. It is because we have the world's largest island. That's a Danish island, right? And for security reasons, and for in order to maintain the Monroe Doctrine, Greenland is in a very important place for the Americans, and that's why we have this historical collaboration. That was a big news. I think we came out with the film in the cinemas right in a little spot where the pandemic sort of let us go back into the cinemas, and it was with the breath held that we sort of dare sending it out. I was terrified that people would not see it, but I was proven wrong, and we had actually quite a huge audience here. It was a commercial success, and also just like also in the press, and also in the schools and stuff, it's being discussed now, you know, what was, you know, the historical aspects of the film, how much interpretation and this. So it's being used quite a lot right now.
Well, congratulations, because it is a great film and it should be seen widely. I hope it will be here in the United States. Again, it's opening nationally on March 26th, but friends and members of the ASF can see it this weekend at scandinaviahouse.org. And we hope you will all join us for that. There are a number of other programs that are offered on scandinaviahouse.org. I encourage you to join our newsletter if you're not already a member of that, and take advantage as much as you can. Panels, film screenings, concerts, children's events, all sorts of things. So do join us. But I'd like to really extend great thanks to you, Christina, and to you, Ulrich, and congratulations on a great film, which I do look forward to seeing all great reviews for it, and it's a good audience response. And I hope we'll see you again, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.